why is there so much fear? Why do we allow there to be so much fear in the game? There shouldn't be any fear in sport. It should be about fun, friendship, inclusion, finding who you are and connecting with other people and finding a community and just having a great time and having some laughs. I can't play footy anymore. I've had 3 knee reconstructions. I had to retire when I was 35. But I can play golf for the rest of my life. I can be a part of a community for the rest of my life. I can play alongside a man and we can compete against each other through the handicapping system. By design, it's very inclusive. But culturally, what we need to do is match how the game is designed around inclusion.
If you're a young kid watching at home, that's exactly what you want, how you want to play your footy. You lose your feet, you get straight back up, you make sure there's pressure on the player around you. If they're attacking the ball, fantastic work. Perceived pressure and actual pressure, well done.
People in the broader community wanted a National Women's League. There were girls that were playing really good footy in our high-performance competitions that we built. Parents wanted their daughters to have something to aspire to play in. You know, even then the media started talking about this, that we've got these amazing players, why can't we make this a reality? The biggest challenge was actually convincing senior key decision makers that AFLW was something that they could deliver on. Not to convince people in the broader community, but convince people internally that, you know, investing in women and girls was going to give them something amazing. There's a lot of fear in golf, and golf's a sport. You should be having fun. It's about play, it's about enjoyment. There's fear on the course. You don't want to stuff the shot up. You are playing your shot in front of everyone else, and everyone is going to see your mistakes. There are no places to hide in golf, so that's scary. The etiquette and some of the culture around golf can be scary. Am I wearing the right clothes, and have I got a collar on? When I relay this story to people who've been in golf for a long time, they all say the same thing, you know. And I'm like, why do we allow there to be so much fear in the game? Why would newcomers stay in the game if the experience, you know, has a certain level of fear attached to it? That's one of the challenges for me that I'd love to see us make it a bit more fun and a bit more relaxing. That's really important if golf clubs want to be inclusive, fully inclusive in the future. I think everyone's aware that there's gender inequality in golf because of our club participation numbers are so imbalanced. You know, 80% of our club golfers are male and 20% are female, so you can't hide from that fact. It's pretty obvious. Greater gender balance in any community means for a healthier community more broadly. You don't have to look too far than, say, AFL and the AFLW. You go out to any community football club and they'll tell you about how much better their club culture is and the club feeling is because there are women and girls teams involved. But I think conversely, what about the impact we're having on the lives of women and girls by opening those doors and we're saying to them, you no longer have any barriers to participate in any part of society. You are welcome here and you come and take your rightful place up in the world. And our sport and our club is not going to stop you from doing that. In fact, we're going to be part of the reason why you go on and thrive. We're going to be part of your platform and we want to help you get to wherever it is you want to go and we want to be part of your journey. Like, how beautiful is that? Surely golf should be a place where women and girls' lives can be enhanced and embraced and supported, that golf can play an amazing role in building the confidence and resilience and capacity of women and girls in our community.
What a great introduction. She joins us live on the show this morning. I've known this excellent human for well over 10 years, far out, 15 years probably. And you continue to do exceptional things every time I check in. Welcome to the morning show, Chyloe Kurdas.
Good morning, really good to be here. It's a bit of a full-on intro when I've just woken up. My terrible golf shot.
Just reminding you who you are, you know, while you wake up. Oh, yeah, that's me. Yeah,
I'll have to do that to you anyway. You can't hide in golf. You can't hide from
It's great. I didn't know what clip to play. I probably should have asked you for a clip, but I thought I'd just take the reins. And you did a brilliant TEDx talk, which we've played on this show a few months ago. So listeners that have been listening to us for a while know a little bit about you. Perhaps I don't know what not to know. You're an incredible sports person. I met you through sport on the footy field, and you were an absolute weapon on the field. How long have you been playing sport, And what was it like growing up in the, am I going to say 80s?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. In the 80s, I mean, I think people's memories might be a little bit faded, and it usually does when the landscape changes as evidently as it is this weekend. We've got women's games all over the football fields, right across most of southern part of Australia, but also up Northern Territory. It's on mainstream TV. Crowds are flocking to the game. The crowds were flocking to the old Muggers games. But what was it like in the 80s deciding to, I want to play football, Mum and Dad?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there weren't a lot of options for you, I think, as a girl, and I think the very first thing I realised that I was good at was sport. You know, I could make my body work pretty well, and I really loved it. There was no better feeling than using my body to have agency in the world. And you know, from the time I can remember, I've always wanted to be able to do it myself, and whether that was ride a horse, ride a bike. Get out and run around in the park. I've always used my body as an agency tool, I guess. And it was probably through sport where I realised that the world was a little bit different for me because I was a girl. And I talk quite openly about the fact that when I'm 5, 2 things happen for me. In fact, the first lesson I get from sport isn't a positive one. We truck sport out to, you know, and we're seeing this weekend what football is trying to do around Indigenous reconciliation and the awareness around the challenges we have in our society around supporting our Indigenous community. We truck sport out to do all those things all the time. But in fact, my first lesson from sport was the complete opposite. You know, I realised that 1, I'm really good at it, but 2, that I'm never going to get to play football professionally simply because I'm female. And that message it leaves me with as a 5-year-old girl is that I'm deficient, that being female is deficient, because if I was enough, if I was worthy, you'd have a platform, you'd have a space, you'd provide for me as well as you do for the boys and men. So that's my starting point in life. And if you think about, for all of your listeners, if you think about your own lives and who are the 5-year-olds that you have in your own lives, what are your hopes and dreams and aspirations for them? Do you want them to already feel like they're not enough as they're taking their first steps? Or do you want them to feel like they're strong, worthy, empowered, and the world's there for their taking, and you just got to rock up and take up your rightful place in the world? And that's what sport gave me, that I couldn't do that. And it really impacted other things in my life. Like, you know, footy wasn't a thing that girls played in amongst the boys in the 80s. I was born in 66, so, you know, very much an 80s kid. But I found my way into karate, so that was really good. And what I loved about karate is that it didn't see any individual characteristic. You know, as a white belt, you started at the back and you progressed as you graded up, and you eventually ended up at the front. Which was kind of weird because all the beginners are down the back who need the most tuition. But what I liked about it is that you progressed on merit. And if you did the work, you went to a grading, and you'd have to achieve certain benchmarks, and the senseis would assess you according to your technique and your skill. And that comes from, from your work rate. It didn't see you as a girl or a boy. It didn't see you as an old person or a young person. It didn't see any of that. Black, white, gay, straight. There was none of that. And I started when I was 8. I was in a school that had kids and adults all training together. And I got my black belt when I was 12. I started teaching when I was 11. And it's because one of the hurdle requirements to get your black belt is you've got to do a certain number of hours of teaching. So I was teaching adult men in their 50s as an 11-year-old.
Wow.
No one gave any kind of consideration to that because karate, removed all those individual characteristics. It didn't see that. And you got rewarded based on work rate. And there was a lot of philosophy in that, like a lot of respectful philosophy. There was so much respect built into it. So you would walk into the dojo and you would bow because you're paying respect to the facility that you have. Without that land, without that space of that dojo, you wouldn't be able to practice your art. And then you always walked behind someone. You never walked in front of someone as a sign of respect. And if someone walked past you who was a higher belt to you, you would bow to them as a sign of respect. To honour the work that they've put in to get to that place. It's not because they've got more status, it's because they've done the work. And before you would fight each other in practice sparring, you would bow to each other. My nan always thought that was the weirdest thing. You know,
I know.
say, I don't get it. You're bowing and then try and kick the shit out of each other. But yeah, you would bow to each other as a sign of respect to say, I honour you, acknowledge you, and I thank you. I've got gratitude for the fact that you are here. Without you being here, I wouldn't be able to practice my art and I wouldn't be able to get better. So you are part of my growth journey. And
Yeah.
I love that. And I still carry that now. And I think if I hadn't had that experience in karate where I could experience, and I used to see it not as sport, but as an art, a martial art, an art. But if I didn't have that experience, I think I would have been quite bitter, to be honest, because karate offered, you know, there is a way of doing it without discrimination. You can do sport and activity and movement and competition without discrimination. You just have to choose to do that. And so it was quite a saving grace for me. Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful. I watch. I know what you mean. I watch the UFC quite a bit, and I see that, you know, some of the fighters that aren't bickering because of promo, they just love each other, and they're just sitting there going, you know, and as soon as they knock them out, they're just like right in their face. It's just how it's amazing balance. You got to leave that ego at the door to be able to switch on professionally and then switch off professionally, and love that human. I feel for you, but also I think about other girls, other females, other people that are in minority groups that are told no. Your body, you just stated your body wanted to. I mean, you might be in a different realm there where physically and mentally you just wanted to play sport so badly. Do you think it's ingrained? Our society has told so many women, but there's so many women out there that actually do love it, but instantly they're told not to, and they've never found their hunger for sport because their immediate society tells them, don't get hungry, it's still not going to work. Is it still around as thick as the 80s, even though it doesn't look it? Are women still having a problem at a young age to love something that looks like a male dominant sport, but something like their body's telling them to be physical and punch and kick? And is it still around?
I think globally, yes, absolutely, it still exists. There are lots of inherent biases and that really restrict women's access. And you know, I think what we've created in metropolitan regions around Australia, around professional women's sport, in the last 5 years. I mean, you know, cricket and basketball have been at this for a long time. The W League, I think they're in their 13th season, I think, something like that. You know, it's been around for a while, having, you know, more women on that stage. But I think the thing that the AFLW did, because the AFL is very good, they're very good spin doctors, and they're very good marketers, and when they don't want to let anything fail, and they'll tell you their story in a way that makes it very compelling. And so what that did is it upped the ante for all the other sports. And you know, I think the FFA sort of, in some ways, might have been left a little bit caught off guard when the AFLW came about, because they had the W League for nearly 10 years at that point, and they hadn't said, you know, there hasn't been any of the traction. The W League hasn't enjoyed any of the traction that AFLW has. Big Bash, however, on the other hand, the WBBL, you look at the way in which that supported it, because cricket went, oh, geez, we better do what footy's doing. And they really threw a lot of investment. And good thing that the BBL came around just before the AFLW. But, you know, I think they had a season head start. So I think the whole idea is what we've been able to create amongst the sporting codes in Australia, who are very competitive with each other. Is that they're all trying to demonstrate to the world that they're doing it better than the other. It's fine, because, you know, if that's what gets you up and motivated and out of bed every day, I don't care. As long as you're delivering for women and girls, that's great. So I think we've been able to create in very, very recent years a clear public demonstration that there are opportunities, and girls in Australia should come and take up their rightful place in the world. It's not necessarily the case everywhere in the world, and you know, and within certain communities, it may not be an option for them, and you know, there are certain challenges depending on which intersection of the community they come from as well, and then there's access. You know, we talk about access. You know, you think about we have lots of scholarships for, Indigenous kids, Indigenous boys to come down to Melbourne and go to Scotch College and all that kind of thing to play footy.
Yeah.
They don't exist yet, really, do they, for the girls? So, I think we've still got some challenges around that. We still have a lot of systemic and structural and cultural challenges for people across different intersections to get engaged in sport.
I've got a couple of questions popping up in the chat, which unfortunately you can't see, but I'll relay them as best as possible. I've got a comment, actually. Fizz, one of the great people that's got 3 oldest girls, currently doing golf lessons at Queen's Park in an all-girls clinic weekly. They're loving it. Landscape is changing, and with our parental support, they see no barriers to choosing their own pathway. Thanks, Chyloe, for pioneering women's sport and forcing doors open. I love the forcing word that you just used there. You are a force, Chyloe, and you always have been. How much was it? How hard was it to be forceful in the face of those systems that you just described? Seemingly solo? Would it have felt quite like you're pioneering? Pioneering means it hasn't been done before. You're changing something that has never been changed before. You're introducing something that's never been seen before. How isolating was it at times, and how hard was it when you would have been faced with many, many walls that would have seemed too high?
Yeah. There was one of me employed in each state, so I've got a wonderful network of friends out of the fact that we went through so many hard things. So Jan Cooper over in WA, she was the National Female Development Manager at the AFL. I was in Victoria. Libby Sadler was in New South Wales. Julia Price, the former Australian wicketkeeper, she was my equivalent at AFL Queensland, and then Emma Gibson over in South Australia as well. So there are some really wonderful people along the journey, and we were individually within our own state bodies beavering away, to use Jan's terms, to try and create momentum internally and manage up and try and convince those senior key decision makers. So that was a godsend that we were sort of one out in our organisations, but collective we were together, and that was fantastic. But yeah, I'll be really honest and say it was probably the most isolating time in my professional career. It was really hard because it wasn't necessarily about trying to change the community. I was seeing every day, every weekend, I was seeing mums and dads and their daughters wanting to make women's football happen and wanting a national competition and wanting a talent pathway. I had parents, Monique Conti's parents, Isabel Huntington's parents, Tyler Hank's parents driving from wherever they lived in the state all the way up to Craigieburn for training and back. And the national championships, and you've got these wonderful athletes like Taylor Harris and Sabrina Frederick, and just all coming together. But there was very little investment. The kids were prepared to fundraise. They were prepared to save their own pocket money. Parents were prepared to put their hands in their own pockets to pay the kids' way to go to all of these things that we were creating before there was any kind of investment. I knew that it was definitely there. Absolutely, the interest would come. You just have to open the door. They're sitting outside. Just open the door.
Yes.
I think probably, Troy, that's the key thing to speak to your previous chat box person. We've all got a leadership platform, and whether it is as a father or a mother or as a sport administrator, as a sports fan, a sports consumer, we all have the opportunity to be a leader in that platform and influence the spaces that we have. And I really like that definition of leadership is influence.
Yeah.
And in that, you've got a choice. That father has got a choice to support his girls and take them into golf or not. But he gets to choose that. He gets to choose the influence that he wants to provide, and the girls then get to choose to take that on board or not. But he gets to choose that. And I think it's very hard to throw your hands in the air and go, oh well, it's just the way things are. No, actually, you exist in a micro community, which exists in another community, and so on. And you get to choose the ripple effect that you want to craft and create. And if we think about dads, that previous chat box person, I don't know what you call them on internet radio, but that previous caller. But I would say what I would tell you is there's some really strong research around the roles of dads actually in the lives of daughters, that there's a lot of research around feminist fathers. In fact, one of the critical things for girls to have in their lives growing up is a feminist father. If you've got your mum, of course, she's going to go for it.
Yeah.
But men, in society own the power base. And so if you grew up with a dad that goes, women are equal and you are going to get every opportunity in your life, and I'm not going to hold you back, and I'm going to make sure, I'm going to kick those doors off the hinges for you, and I'm going to support you, encourage you all the way. That has such an impact, because she then grows up expecting that from other men that she comes across in life. And so I guess that's a really important thing. We all think that gender equality and rising women up is, we all often defer it to women, I guess, like Indigenous people, it's on them to try and change racism. I'm like, no, they're not the ones creating it. And so the piece around gender equality and gender discrimination, that is that's a space for men as well as women to collectively do it in allyship. That it's about crafting a culture that we collectively want to live in. And what people don't understand is that gender inequality affects men just as much as it affects women. It constrains men to be a certain type of man. And I'm sure, Troy, growing up playing footy and like what you've gone through, and you had to, conform to be a certain type of footballer, a certain type of man, and behave in a certain type of way in certain situations. And if you didn't, we all know those words that you would have gotten called.
Yeah, of course.
Or you would have been pushed out. So I think it's a really important thing for men, and particularly fathers, to understand that they've got a huge role to play around influence.
You just touched on racism just then. Is racism in women's sport? That might sound like a real obvious question. Like, of course it would be, but is it? You're already a minority in that world, in that space. But we talk about minorities quite often on this show. So there's so many. Where do you go? You can really divide it into, you can go down to a slither, and that last slither's still copping it. But is there racism in AFL women's football as far as you've seen?
I've not seen any obvious examples of that, but I don't think there's a part of Australia where it's not built into our system structure and cultures. If you look at what happened in the Super Netball last year when they had their Indigenous round up in northern Queensland,
we've talked about.
Team didn't, they selected an Indigenous player, but she didn't get any court time.
I know. That's horrible. In the last 5 minutes, they're up by 7 points or something. They were going to win. They still didn't put her on, but they made her the face of all the marketing.
Absolutely. And so, that's not okay.
No.
And so, and there's been a fair bit of work that's gone on after that. It was a good teachable moment, and that's about as best as we can make out of that situation. But I think we would be silly to think that it doesn't exist. One thing, I guess, about the women's sporting community is that probably outside those hyper feminized sports like netball, for instance, I think there's always been it's always been a really welcoming space. Certainly football has for, same-sex attracted women, women that maybe don't fit into a particular gender representation. And so consequently, I think it's always been quite an accepting space. And I think the types of women that have gravitated to it have sort of always had one eye on creating fairness and safety and for everyone. And I think there's always been a really strong commitment to social causes. You look at how the AFLW girls use their social media platforms to call stuff out. They say things that the men in the men's system don't call out, and they're bloody awesome at it. I love it. And they've been wanting an Indigenous round since year one. They wanted a pride. The AFL still doesn't have a pride round in the AFLM. So but the girls made it happen because it's really important to them. And however, if you look at how many Indigenous players, I think I read yesterday there are 20 Indigenous players, one less than last year on an AFLW list. That number has gone up significantly since the first year, but there's, I think 6 more teams than the first year of the competition. And 5 of those players, I think there's 25 of them are on one team at Fremantle. And
Right.
Yeah. And then 3 are at Brisbane. And I think there's a couple, 2 or maybe 3 at Gold Coast. So, it's not something that we don't have Indigenous players in every club. And why is that? Well, there are some systems and structures that have made it difficult for Indigenous women to get through the talent program, or to be identified, or to have access to the resources, particularly remote women, remote girls. If you think about, like I said before, there were some really wonderful young Indigenous girls that we had seen playing up in the NT. but Cyril Rioli gets a scholarship to Scotch, for instance. But where are those girls? And because football, and that's one of the other things, is that we had to fight tooth and nail to get football played in the private schools for girls, because all the netball coaches were worried that it was going to take girls away from netball. So there were girls in those schools on netball scholarships and the like. But, there was because they weren't playing football, there was no opportunity to bring girls into the schools on scholarships. Not that I'm saying relocating Indigenous kids is the right thing to do either. But these opportunities and these choices were available and still are available to boys and men en masse, but not so much for girls. And so my hope is that, the school girls football cabinet becomes a pride of place for some of our independent schools. And that perhaps some of their investment might go into attracting female athletes, not just the male athletes, from all walks of life. Yeah, but it still exists. I do think there's a stronger social conscience in women's sports, simply because what we've had to go through to create our platform. Yeah.
Great description, Chyloe. I know I went up to remote communities Uendamu with Ali Anderson, plays for Brisbane Lions. I had previously gone on a trip there with all some AFL boys, Jai Simpkins, and the boys and girls ran, but then when it was time to kick the footy, the girls stood on the side and the guys just flocked Jai, and plays for North Melbourne, as an absolute gun, Indigenous player. But that later trip, when Ali came up, all the girls ran up to Ali and were just going, just off her t-shirt, just going, come on, kick the footy with me. And just to see how much different activation you got from those girls, even though there was an Indigenous football player there, it was male, and there was difference culturally. A lot of the girls still don't speak to their older men in a certain way. There's a respect. But so you spoke a little bit about it, and then culturally there's some barriers, but just the amazing connection that this Indigenous girl walking into this community, it was off the head. She was the superstar of the whole trip, and it was a great acknowledgement to say there is seriously a need for more Indigenous footballers to be put on the spotlight. So it's a great thing. And it is Indigenous Round coming up, ladies and gentlemen, this weekend. It's a really cool thing. Thanks for touching on racism, and especially ahead of that weekend. I want to talk about a very general conversation that I've heard around me. I've never thought it myself, but that doesn't exclude me from being privileged in this space. We look at the game and we say, and you've read enough comments in the threads, probably on social media, so boring, 22 disposals, 8 handballs, 2 tackles. She's not a superstar. Gary Ablett Jr. could do that in 1 quarter. Look how injured they get. You see the physicality from the girls. They come back and defend, and they get crunched lightly. The guys would get crunched way harder than that, and they don't walk off the field. This game's not even. You want equality. It's not equal. Like if you want to be treated like a man, then all that chat. You've heard it probably before. I hear it as a male, and it makes me cringe. What's your response to that stuff?
Actually, to be honest, Troy, my response is sadness, not for us, but sadness for those guys. And they're predominantly men that will make those kind of comments. And it's
it's all men. It's all men.
Yeah, what I was speaking to before around how gender inequality constrains men, and I haven't come across anyone who's gone to a women's football match or a girls' football match, just even community footy, and just gone. I mean, Troy, you might have seen some of the under-18 stuff we did at Melbourne Uni back 15 years ago. And there's nothing more beautiful than someone who just loves what they're doing, whether it's music or reading a book or playing sport. But it's just nothing more beautiful than just seeing people in their element. And it's just such a passionate space. And because we haven't been gendered to hold our feelings in, we don't. When we play football as well, we're just like in it. And, I think Nathan Burke made a comment on the weekend. They're like, apparently they do some kind of secret ritual, the journo said. And he went, yeah, they just go into a room and they've got a thing where they turn a song on and there's no coaches, it's just the players, and they shut the door and they turn the lights off and they just go crazy. I don't know what they're doing there, but they just do that thing, And you've been in women's football circles, and you know what it's like, and it's a really beautiful space. So there's so much passion and joy in that space. So I haven't come across anyone who's gone along to that and not been a convert. So I guess my response to those people is not about, kind of the abuse or vitriol they might be trying to inflict onto us, but I feel sad for them. I feel sad because what I see for them is a lack of freedom. Actually, I feel that they are the ones that are constrained and stuck, and they feel so unsafe doing something other than that. And so there is this whole thing of, I just like, you boys are just trying so hard to conform and fit in, and I just if only you could free yourself of those shackles of masculinity, those traditional notions of masculinity, you would discover something even more beautiful. Think about what you are missing out is sitting in the joy of watching these women do this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're sitting in criticism. Like, imagine getting up and living with yourself every day where all you saw was something to criticize rather than just something to enjoy and be a part of, and just let it fill your heart. Like, that's what I feel when I see those comments. So I don't take them on board. What I actually just think it's important to keep bringing love and joy to the world as a result, because it's infectious, and we will eventually get those people over the line. But I feel inherent sadness, and I think it keeps my motivation going to continue to break down those barriers for men so that they can be their full selves as well. I think that's a really important part of this story.
What's your life like at the moment, Chyloe? You've talked a little bit about history, but what's your role now in sport? I know you're we've put up a little bio and talked about it before you jumped on, but you're involved in golf more so now. Tell us about your role with Golf Australia.
Yeah, I'm their female engagement senior manager, so I look after our national gender equality strategy to try and get more women and girls involved in the game, both on the course and in leadership spaces. So it's a different experience in golf. In football, the challenge was internally trying to convince those senior key decision makers internally to create a women's league. In golf, everyone at the head office and GA and our partner organisations were really committed and supported, and they're great, fantastic. But the challenge for us is in golf clubland, just helping golf club members and golf club leaders to understand why it's important, in the inherent challenges. And golf has got a very long and strong history. There are wonderful traditions and history, and there is a whole theatre about golf as well, just like there is with football. And yeah, just trying to help people to feel safe in helping the sport to evolve and ensuring we still take along those traditions and histories and honouring our history, but ensuring that the sport repositions itself in such a way that the sport actually has a legitimate future. How do you
approach that? I mean, you're obviously speaking to men mostly, I'm assuming. How do you approach that in a nutshell? Like,
yeah, the irony is that in golf, that there are also some older women that discriminate against women, because golf historically has been for women a midweek practice, because women weren't allowed to play on the weekends and they weren't allowed to get 7-day memberships. They were called associates. And so they crafted out this little space for themselves midweek. And then we're coming along going, no, golf's got to be every day for everyone. And so, they've had this beautiful space for a long time, this women-only space. And all of a sudden, there's some fear around that. So what do I use? Again, I use empathy and understanding where they're starting from. And that's their starting point. And we've got to work with them and help both men and women to feel safe, to understand how important it is to evolve and grow the game. Because they've been wonderful stalwarts of the sport. They have grown it. They've led it. They've been the custodians of the game during their time as leaders. But the message that I generally will send with them is, what's your legacy piece going to be? Like, it's great what you've done, but if what you do now halts the growth of the game, then you're going to leave nothing behind.
100%.
And that's a really important point, like to consider that you're not just a custodian for now, but for the future, and making sure that, and if you've had a wonderful time, surely you want to leave something behind for the next generation.
Exactly.
Make it better. So that's generally how I work with them on that. And they're coming with us. We're getting some wonderful shifts and traction, and it's a really good space to be in. They're wonderful people. But yeah, it's a different community that I'm used to working with. But I'm really loving it, and it's and I'm a hack golfer. I'm not a club member, but it's a good sport, particularly if you've got busted knees like me, Troy.
Yeah.
All those footballers listening in, it's a good post-footy career option.
Wow, you really touch on something there. Just about leaving a legacy. That's great. I wish I could talk to you forever, Chyloe, and leaving a legacy. It's funny because you're talking about, we see it so often in this archaic world. The people that are in it seem to be protecting something that gave them so much. it doesn't make sense. But you could never to unpack that and to tell someone you're preaching to a wall sometimes that's not facing you. So I mean, it's just such incredible work you do. You are one of the most effective world changers I've got in my life, Chyloe.
Oh, thanks.
You've done a massive thing with AFL women's football. People you probably don't realise, you don't get on TV as much as the big power players, but you have, you're etched in my head as, if anyone's watching the football, women's football, just think of Chyloe. You've done so much work in that space, but you're so encouraging to other women. There's more comments coming up, and I'm just going to read them out and give you some glory. Fizz, another guy, he's been involved with the Geelong Falcons girls program since its inception, chatting to Brendan McCartney, who you obviously know, who coached the Falcons girls the last 2 years. He says it's the best 2 years of coaching he's ever had. He's coached the Western Bulldogs. He's coached the Geelong Football Club. That's a beautiful thing. Adam Muir, when I watch and know the scores and tackles, I know the scores and tackles and athleticism is different, but I don't care. A good close game's still a good close game, regardless. Very true. Chyloe, thank you so much for your time. Off into your world. I really appreciate you. This is a great way to finish off the week and ahead of football round. You're the best.
Thanks, Troy. Good to chat. Really good to see you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you too. Hang around. I should give you a song request. If you've got a song request, what do you listen to if it's Friday Jams time? What do you want to listen to? I know I'm going to throw you on the spot here.
Oh, my favourite band's The National. I don't know if that's going to work for your audience, but my favourite band's The National, Blood Buzz Ohio. It's a good pump-up track.
Blood
Buzz Ohio.
I've got it right here. Chyloe, you've been a fantastic way to finish off the week. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy the footy.
Will do.